let's begin animating. So here is our start file, 04 begin. So this is almost as if we had to work on the shot that happened prior to this. And so our task is to animate the fight scene. So this is going to be pretty cool. Now getting started, what I like to do is go ahead and block in the animation. That way we don't have any distractions as to the interpolation and very floaty actions. Alright, so right now we're just focusing on strong poses, extremes, as well as getting rough timing down. And then at that point, once we're satisfied with what we have, we can then go ahead and start to polish using automatic mode. Alright, great. Also, I'd like to point out that on frame -10 is a way to go back to the T-pose if you ever needed to for the character. And that brings up an interesting point, is that what if we needed to make a change to the character's control rig or to our model for whatever reason? We can go to frame -10 to have that happen. Now keep in mind that if we needed to make a drastic change but still have a way to transfer the animation, we could always use Save Load Animation underneath the animation menu. Feel free to take a look at Introduction to Animation in 3ds Max for more information on this, because this is definitely a time saver. But keep in mind that the menu item here has changed to the animation menu, where it was before, which was under the file menu. Okay, great. So I'll go ahead and move back to frame 0. And by the way, I'm doing this, I'm sliding on the track bar using Control-Alt and dragging with the left mouse button. If we drag with the right mouse button, we can go ahead and adjust our end time. So that's really neat. I'll go ahead and bring the start back to frame 0. We'll also make sure auto key is on so we could speed up the time it takes to set keys. Keep in mind we do have selection sets in our scene. So these here, they work with set key mode. So what that means is if we had it set to our villainess, we couldn't set a key on our heroine if we have that chosen. But I like to go ahead and work with auto key, and it doesn't quite look at the selection set system here, but it's just a fast way to animate. So let's go ahead and make sure we have auto key enabled. And if we need to set a key on all of our controls, we could always select them from here and use the key button. Let's go ahead and check our key filters. So we'll make sure that we have all necessary channels selected. So that's rotation, position, it's good to go. Custom attributes, yes. So we should be just fine. And now at this point, let's go ahead and talk about what we need to do. We need to make sure that this looks believable. So it's all about the chemistry between the two characters. So just to give you an idea, we have our green character here that is confident. This is our heroine, and she knows without a doubt that she could beat the purple villain, I should say. So that's kind of the mentality behind these two characters. Perhaps they're sisters, or perhaps they're just friends that had a disagreement. Either way, it's good to develop a story. It just makes your animation more interesting. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started here. We're going to go ahead and block in the villainess first, and we'll start to work on our heroine. Alright, so coming from frame 0, what I like to do always is just make sure all controls are keyed. So we could select the villainess controls from her selection set and just use the big key button. Alright, great. So now at this point, we could do the same thing for our heroine on frame 0. And now we're ready to move forward. Okay, so with our track bar selected, let's go ahead and move to frame 6, and we'll have the character move forward here for her initial attack. Now, why frame 6? Well, it's really just a matter of kind of studying life and trying to figure out the timing that you would like to use. And this is going to come with much practice. It's not something that can happen overnight, but it's a very fun process once you start to really understand what is involved in a good animation and how much work needs to be put in. So remember to always study life. Take as much notes as you can. But on frame 6, I'm going to go ahead and have her just translate forward for her attack. And I might have her left foot kind of touch on the floor here. She moves in. And then for follow through, we'd want the right leg to pull back. And she is coming in at an angle, so I'll make sure of that. With that foot control selected, I'll go back to the center of gravity, the left foot control. I'll grab the arms and the elbows, everything that we need to actually move her entirely. So that should be everything. And then we can have her just kind of move over here just slightly. Keep in mind that the green character will move out the way for her counterattack. So we should also keep that in mind. Alright, so looking at frame 0, I might actually go back here and then kind of slant the foot out a bit more given her direction, just to make sure that she kind of comes in and the flow is nice when she does. Alright, beautiful. Alright, so moving forward here, let's go ahead and take a look. I'd like to go back to the center of gravity and kind of pull that back a bit. And then I'd like to have a more dynamic looking pose here, so we can start to adjust the foot as well. And I'll make sure that this is all on frame 6. It's very easy to override a keyframe. If you go to a different frame here, let's say frame 9, and you pose the foot, you can always drag that key over, and then that's going to be your new pose. So that's just something to keep in mind if you accidentally pose on a frame that you would not like a pose on. Alright, great. So I'll go ahead and rotate the foot back for some follow through. I'll go back to the center of gravity. Since she's attacking, we can go ahead and have that rotate forward. And her torso is going to twist. Now keep in mind when we do this, it's best to twist from the hip and chest controls and not necessarily the center of gravity until it's time. I only like to twist from this when it's absolutely needed. That keeps rotation clean. And it keeps everything more manageable in the F-curve editor. Alright, so considering this attack here, I might go ahead and twist the hips and definitely twist the torso here. I'll go ahead and twist that around so that she can swing forward with the sword. Before we get to the sword arm, let's go ahead and take the opposite arm and throw that back so that flows back as she makes her attack. We don't want the two arms forward. That will look very unnatural, very mechanical, and that's what we're trying to avoid. Also, keep in mind that we're just working on one character at a time here. Based off of our thumbnails, we can confidently pose both characters, so we don't have to overwhelm ourselves here. We could just go ahead and work one character at a time. And it really depends on what you prefer. Depends on your process. If you would prefer to work on both characters simultaneously, you most certainly can. And sometimes it may call for that. But sometimes we may not need to. Alright, so I'll start to have the sword arm push forward. I'll go to the shoulder, rotate that forward. Just taking care of more of the easier tasks first before we start to get to the more complicated ones, which involve here, just making sure that we rotate this properly so that she has a nice swing and so that we can avoid a gimbal lock in our control. We've already pointed this out in the previous lesson, but remember we're using our gimbal coordinate system for our rotate tool, and then for our move tool, you can use any one really, but I tend to stick with parent or local. So I'm going to go ahead and work with local. Again, if you'd like to learn more about the settings here, feel free to take a look at Introduction to Animation in Max. Alright, but notice here we now have the sword getting thrown forward for that initial attack. Beautiful. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look. We'll scrub through. Awesome. All right, so at this point, we'll go ahead and stop the lesson, and in the next lesson, we will continue working on the villain's initial attack.